On the edge of a frozen mountain town, where winter moves like a living spirit, there is a night people still whisper about. A night when a patrol officer and his loyal German shepherd stepped into a storm that would test everything they believed in. No one knew that, behind the quiet snowfall, a powerful family was pulling hidden strings, or that a stranger shaped by old battles was about to appear in the darkness, like a silent answer to a whispered prayer. As the snow thickens and danger draws close, their paths collide in a way that will change Winter's Reach forever. Before we begin this journey of courage, loyalty, and the miracles hidden inside the cold, tell me where you are watching from. I would love to read your comment. Winter's Reach lay beneath a sky the color of cold iron, the kind of winter nights where even the mountains seemed to hold their breath. Snow drifted endlessly over the quiet town, tourists packing into lodges above the ridgeline, locals hurrying home with collars pulled tight, and the narrow streets glistening like sheets of polished glass. The storm was not the kind that roared, but the kind that whispered, a steady curtain of white that softened the world into stillness. Sergeant Jack Rowan, 32 years old, patrolled these streets with the weary confidence of a man who had outgrown fear but not responsibility. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face shaped by wind, cold, and too many graveyard shifts. His dark hair was kept short, his jaw perpetually dusted with stubble, and his humor, when it showed, was dry as mountain bark. Years ago, a messy divorce and a failed attempt at settling in a bigger city left him quieter, more disciplined, and perhaps lonelier than he admitted. The badge had become the one thing he never questioned. His partner, however, was the thing he treasured. Shadow sat in the back of the K9 unit, a 4-year-old German shepherd with a black and silver coat, sharp amber eyes, and a posture regal enough to make tourists ask if he was part wolf. Shadow wasn't. He was simply a working dog who had survived a rough start, rescued from an illegal breeder as a pup, malnourished and timid, until Jack took him in. The two of them rebuilt each other, slowly, one trial at a time. Now, Shadow watched the world with unshakable focus, head resting by the window, breath forming soft clouds against the glass. Tonight, the storm seemed determined to keep the town subdued. With short staffing at the department and holiday crowds swelling at the ski resorts, Jack had volunteered for an extended night shift. Someone's got to keep the tourists from sledding straight into lake property lines, he'd told his captain. The truth was simpler. He preferred quiet patrols where it was just him, Shadow, and the muttering hum of the radio. Winter's Reach was picturesque under snowfall. Pine trees bowed under white blankets, rooftops sparkling beneath lantern light, and banners advertising winter festivals fluttering in the wind. Jack took it all in with a practiced eye, scanning for trouble the way a mountain lion sensed the wind. The trouble arrived abruptly. A red coupe burst across the town square, tires skidding wildly, fishtailing within inches of a group of teenagers dragging home their battered snowboards. Jack slammed the brake with controlled precision, lights flashing blue through the storm, and muttered under his breath, "Not on my shift." Shadow let out a sharp chuff. Even he seemed to roll his eyes. Jack accelerated. The cruiser glided over the ice with deliberate force, traction control buzzing beneath the floorboards. The coupe made the worst choice possible. It cut across the pedestrian walkway and bolted toward the winding scenic road overlooking the frozen lake. The radio crackled. "Rowan, that plate comes back to Tristan Vale. Repeat, son of the Vale logistics family. You need to be careful out there, Sarge." Jack smirked in that dry way of his. "ICE doesn't care about family wealth," he replied. "It'll flip anyone if they're dumb enough." Shadow gave a soft grunt, almost approval. The chase was not long. On the lakeside road, the coupe's back wheels spun helplessly, unable to fight the sheet of black ice. Jack eased behind it, lights reflecting off the snow like distant stars. He stepped out into the night, the cold instantly biting through his uniform, and approached with deliberate calm. The driver's door flung open. Tristan Vale, 24, stumbled out. An expensively dressed young man with a designer coat, glossy hair cut too perfectly for mountain weather, and the half-drunk arrogance of someone who had never truly been told no. He was lean, slightly tall, features handsome in a spoiled sort of way. A lifetime of indulgence had molded his posture, chin lifted, shoulders back, as if gravity itself owed him special favor. And beneath his bravado was a history Jack knew well. Tristan had spent the past few years ricocheting between scandals hushed by his father's money. "Officer," Tristan slurred, waving his phone like a magic wand. "Relax, the town practically works for us. Half the restaurants here buy supplies from my father's company. You write a ticket, I make a phone call, everything gets erased." Jack didn't dignify that with a reaction. He simply held out the breathalyzer. Tristan blew into it with a roll of his eyes, swaying. The machine chirped, the reading far above the legal limit. Predictable. "You're over the threshold," Jack said calmly. "Turn around, hands behind." "Hold on," Tristan snapped, dialing without waiting. "I'm calling my father." Jack waited. He always waited. Let the strings get pulled. He had scissors in his file drawers. While Tristan barked into the phone, headlights bloomed down the road. A black SUV approached, quiet, deliberate, its engine humming with the smoothness of expensive engineering. It pulled over several yards behind the coupe. 4 men stepped out. Not tourists, not drunks, not locals. These were professional security, or close enough. Men in thick tactical jackets, boots designed for stability on snow, and eyes that scanned the environment with cold efficiency. Jack noted the way their hands rested near their belts, too practiced. These were not random bodyguards. They moved like men who'd done worse than escort duty. One stepped forward. He was in his late 40s, square-jawed, with a scar barely visible beneath a week-old beard. His voice was low, almost too polite. "Sergeant Rowan, we're here on behalf of Mr. Vale. Perhaps we can have a conversation." Jack kept his stance. Neutral. "You can speak from right there." Behind him, shadow shifted in the cruiser, posture straightening, pupils narrowing. He sensed tension before men admitted it. The lead guard tried diplomacy again. "A misunderstanding like this doesn't need to escalate. Our employer is willing to—" Jack interrupted, tone even but firm. "Your employer doesn't dictate state law. Step back. I'm placing Tristan Vale under arrest." For a second, the cold air thickened. Then it happened fast. One guard moved in from the left, pretending to approach harmlessly. Another circled wide. Jack's boots slipped slightly on the icy patch as he shifted to keep eyes on all 4. That was what they wanted. The nearest guard grabbed his wrist in a smooth, trained motion. Too clean to be improvised. Jack pivoted to break the hold, but the ice stole half his footing. Another guard used the moment to seize his shoulder, turning his momentum against him. They weren't striking. They were subduing, disabling communication, isolating him. Jack felt the pressure on his arm, the attempt to wrench control from him, but he kept his breathing steady. Shadow erupted. The dog's bark tore through the storm, a sound that didn't just come from throat or muscle, but from loyalty itself. Shadow lunged in his crate, thrashing, desperate to reach Jack. But the crate door was still locked. He could only throw himself against it, teeth bared, eyes blazing with protective fury. One guard leaned toward the cruiser, hand moving for the latch. Jack twisted against the hold, heart pounding, not from fear for himself, but fear for the only soul that had never left him. And through the spiraling snow, through the tension tightening like wire, something else stirred in the darkness. A pair of headlights dimmed in the distance. An engine hummed softly. Someone had arrived, someone watching, someone who would change everything. And the winter night, quiet until seconds ago, prepared itself for the collision of choices, loyalties, and the unseen warriors forged by snow, hardship, and necessity. The chapter closed on Jack's hoarse warning, half choked by the grip on his arm. "Shadow, stay!" But Shadow wasn't listening. Shadow was protecting. The storm took a breath. The fight had only begun. The frozen road beneath winter's reach stretched like a pale ribbon toward the lake, its surface slick with the deceptive shine of black ice. Snow drifted in slow spirals under the beams of Jack's patrol cruiser, settling over the silent pines that guarded the water's edge. The town behind him glowed faintly, lodge lights flickering like distant lanterns in the storm, while ahead, the world narrowed into a tunnel of darkness and falling white. Jack stood beside the stopped red coupe, breath rising in soft clouds. The air carried the metallic scent of winter, the kind that pricked the lungs and reminded every living creature that this land belonged to the cold, not to the men who trespassed on it. Shadow remained in the cruiser, posture tense, watching through the glass with eyes that missed nothing. Tristan Vale still clutched his phone when Jack instructed him to place his hands behind his back. The young man looked older in the harsh light, shadows beneath his eyes revealing long nights of indulgence and entitlement etched into the curve of his smirk. The wind tugged at his designer coat, its fabric far too delicate for mountain storms. "Officer Rowan," Tristan drawled, half slurred, "let's not act like this is serious. You're making too much out of nothing." "That depends on whether we're talking about state law or your father's expectations," Jack replied evenly. Before Tristan could respond, the black SUV behind them shifted, its headlights dimming as four figures stepped out. The men moved with eerie synchronization, their breath visible in the cold as they spread into a loose formation. Jack noted their appearances automatically, the way years of policing had trained him. The oldest among them, the one with the faint scar along his jaw, held himself with the measured calm of someone accustomed to risk. His eyes were sharp, dark, and unreadable behind the drifting snow. His build was solid, shoulders thick beneath his winter jacket, boots heavy enough to grip even the slickest ice. A second man, younger, carried a stiffness that suggested military history. Neat haircut, rigid posture, movements precise. The third wore a bulky coat, but walked lightly, almost too lightly, betraying agility beneath the layers. The fourth man lingered closest to the SUV, tall and narrow-faced, his hands gloved but restless, as if waiting for an unspoken cue. These were not mere chauffeurs. They were trained, coordinated, and far too comfortable stepping into something that wasn't their jurisdiction. Jack positioned himself subtly between them and Tristan. "Evening," he said, tone steady. Scarjaw nodded politely. His voice was smooth. "Sergeant Rowan, we're here to ensure Mr. Vale's safety." "Then you should step back," Jack replied. "Safety starts with not interfering in an arrest." A flicker passed across Scarjaw's eyes. Respect or calculation, Jack couldn't tell. One of the younger guards took a step forward. "We just want to talk." Jack kept his body relaxed but ready. The storm seemed to hush around them. "Talk from where you stand," Jack said. The man paused, then gestured vaguely. "Look, Sergeant, nobody wants this to become—" Tristan broke in with a loud groan. "Oh my God, just fix this already. My dad is expecting an update." Jack ignored him. The guards didn't. Scarjaw cleared his throat, as though making one final attempt at diplomacy. "Sergeant Rowan, we can resolve this quietly." "And I'm resolving it legally," Jack answered. For a moment, there was a silence carved out of tension, the kind that settles right before a snow cornice breaks off a ridge. Then everything condensed at once. The second guard approached from Jack's left, slow and harmless seeming, like someone asking for directions. Snow crunched under his boots. Another shifted closer from the opposite side. Their movements were subtle, practiced. Shadow barked sharply inside the cruiser. Jack turned just enough to keep all four in view. The ice beneath him glinted, a small warning he didn't have time to fully consider. "Sergeant," Scarjaw said, voice still even, "this doesn't have to—" The guard nearest Jack moved, not fast, not loudly, but with smooth, professional precision, closing the distance enough to reach for Jack's wrist. Jack countered instinctively, pivoting to deflect, but the ice stole a fraction of his footing. Another guard stepped in, trying to grip his shoulder, not striking, but controlling. Their goal was clear, to restrain, not to harm. Their hands were firm, coordinated, trained, exploiting balance more than force. Jack dug his boots in, refusing to fall. Shadow's bark deepened, echoing through the night like a drumbeat. But one of the guards had already reached the cruiser, fingers brushing the door handle. Jack's pulse surged. "Don't touch that door!" The guard didn't listen. Shadow threw his weight against the metal from inside, snarling in a fierce, protective warning. His body collided with the crate door but could not open it. His eyes blazed through the window, refusing to be separated from his handler. "Stand down," Jack ordered, voice hoarse as he fought to remain upright, while the men tightened their coordination around him. Tristan watched with a mix of fascination and intoxicated arrogance, like a spectator at an exclusive show arranged just for him. Snow settled on the shoulders of his coat, melting where his breath warmed the air. "This is ridiculous," Tristan muttered. "Dad will fix this. Just back off and—" But he didn't finish, because the night shifted. Out beyond the pines, faint and distant, a pair of headlights glowed through the snowfall. Off, then on again, as though someone deliberately dimmed them. A quiet engine rumbled, low and measured, not hurried but purposeful. It drew close enough for its presence to be undeniable, but not close enough to reveal the driver. Jack felt the tension change, something unseen, something watchful. The guards noticed too. Their movements hesitated just long enough for Jack to push back and stabilize his footing on the ice. Scarjaw turned his head slightly, scanning the darkness behind the drifting flakes. "We weren't expecting anyone else." Tristan frowned, suddenly less confident. "What is that? Who's there?" Shadow pressed harder against the window, barking with sharper urgency now. Not chaotic fear, but recognition of a shift in momentum. The headlights flickered again. The engine cut off. Silence swept over the road, swallowing even the wind. All 6 men, Jack, the guards, and Tristan, stood frozen, breaths crystallizing in the air. Somewhere in the darkness, someone stepped out of the vehicle. Footsteps crunched softly on the snow. Jack couldn't see the figure yet, but something about the rhythm of the steps, the calm control, the absence of hesitation, told him this was not a random traveler. The guards spread subtly, adjusting formation. Tristan shivered, not from the cold. Jack straightened, pushing off the slight leverage he had regained, eyes narrowing toward the approaching shadow. And as the unseen figure drew closer through the whispering snowfall, the storm seemed to lean in, listening. Because this arrival, quiet, unexpected, unannounced, was the beginning of a shift none of them fully understood yet. The storm exhaled, the footsteps stopped, and the night braced itself for the stranger who would tip the scales. The stranger had not yet stepped fully into the light when the storm seemed to tighten around the lakeside road, as if the cold itself recognized the shape of conflict forming there. Snow drifted thicker now, slow, drifting flakes illuminated by the cruiser's headlights, falling like silent ash across the frozen earth. Jack Rowan felt the shift instinctively. Years of patrol work had trained him to read danger long before it announced itself. The guards sensed it too, their shoulders tensed, weight shifting subtly, their practice coordination momentarily disrupted by curiosity. But Tristan Vale, oblivious to deeper instincts, blinked drunkenly into the darkness. "Who the hell is that?" he muttered, no longer sounding amused. Before the answer arrived, the moment broke. Scarjaw lifted a hand toward the guard nearest the K9 cruiser, perhaps to call him back or to hurry the plan forward. Jack couldn't tell which. What he did know was this. The guard's fingers were already on the latch of Shadow's crate. "Stop!" Jack barked, twisting against the hold at his shoulder. Shadow exploded into a frenzy of desperate movement. The German shepherd's barks were sharp, protective, fueled by instinct older than winter itself. His paws hammered against the crate door, muscles coiled with the single intention of reaching his partner. The guard yanked the door. Shadow lunged out, fast, low, trained, protective. For an instant it seemed the dog would reach Jack, but the men surrounding the officer had anticipated this reaction. The second guard pivoted, cutting off Shadow's trajectory, while the third moved to intercept from the side. Jack shouted again, a strained, commanding cry that barely carried over the wind. "Shadow, back!" Shadow didn't listen. Loyalty, fierce and unquestioning, drove him forward. The guards reacted as a coordinated unit. One stepped into Shadow's path, blocking his momentum. Another extended a boot, not with the wild aggression of a street fight, but with cold, practiced precision. A defensive tactic designed to repel an attacking dog without escalating to lethal force. The strike redirected Shadow's movement and knocked him sideways into the snow. Jack's heart clenched at the sight, a fierce ache rising in his chest. Shadow struggled up, shaken but determined. The shepherd braced himself again, body low, breath steaming from his muzzle as he tried to regain balance on the slick ice. A second guard advanced, and Shadow's growl deepened, a sound raw with defiance. Jack strained against the hold on his arms, voice sharp. "Don't hurt him!" Scarjaw finally stepped forward, tone low. "Call off the dog." "I can't call him off if you're attacking me," Jack snapped. Shadow charged again. The guards braced, and the stranger finally arrived. He stepped into the faint cone of light cast by the cruiser. A man in his late 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face weathered not by age but by cold places and hard decisions. His jacket was thick canvas, worn at the seams, and patches of snow clung to him as naturally as dust to an old tool. His movements were steady, fluid, disciplined, not hesitant, not panicked. Elias Crane had the bearing of someone who once belonged to a world where precision meant survival. His eyes swept the scene, Jack restrained, Shadow outnumbered, Tristan swaying, guards bracing. And in that single glance, he understood far more than most men would in minutes. "Enough," Elias said, voice calm, yet carrying a quiet authority. Scarjaw turned slightly. "This is a private matter. Keep walking." Elias didn't walk away. Jack recognized something in the man's stance, combat readiness woven with restraint. This was no civilian who accidentally stumbled onto trouble. This was someone who had seen conflict up close and survived it. Shadow tried to circle wide, attempting to bypass the guards. The men closed in. Elias moved first. He didn't shout. He didn't charge. He simply stepped forward with the fluid economy of someone trained to neutralize danger quickly without causing catastrophic harm. His gloved hand shot out, gripping the wrist of the nearest guard. A twist, controlled, efficient, forced the man's hand open. The firearm he had been angling for slipped from his grip, falling harmlessly into the snow. The man staggered back, not injured, but thoroughly disabled. Another guard lunged toward Elias. Elias pivoted, letting the man's forward momentum betray him. The guard's boots slid on the icy ground, his balance compromised long enough for Elias to guide him into a controlled fall. The man hit the snow with a muted thud, breath leaving him in a cloud. Shadow seized the opening and darted toward Jack. The third guard reached for him, but Elias intercepted again, this time using a simple sweep of his arm to redirect the guard's attempt. The move knocked the man sideways, his boots scrambling for grip on the slick surface. Jack, still constrained, managed to regain his footing. The guard holding him made a last attempt to tighten his grip, but Elias appeared behind him in a blur of movement, pulling the guard's arm into an immobilizing hold. The guard gasped as his leverage vanished, and Jack tore free. Shadow reached Jack's side, pressing himself protectively against his handler's leg. Jack knelt immediately, slipping one arm around the dog's neck, steadying him, whispering a reassurance only Shadow could hear. "You're okay. I'm here. I've got you." Tristan Vale, drunken bravado melting, stared at Elias with wide eyes. Who are you?" Elias didn't answer him. Snow swirled harder now, as though the storm itself had come to witness the confrontation. For a moment, time stretched, Jack kneeling beside Shadow, guards regrouping in confusion, Tristan wobbling, and Elias standing like a piece of stone carved from Sphi, another world. Scarjaw exhaled slowly, raising both hands a fraction, not in surrender, but in recalculation. "We don't want this to escalate," he said carefully. "Then you should leave the officer alone," Elias replied. Tristan rounded on his guards, anger rising as fear ebbed. "Do something! My father will—" "No," Scarjaw said, his voice flat. "Your father wouldn't want a federal investigation because you chose the wrong night to misbehave." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Smart man." Jack stood again, keeping one hand on Shadow's collar. "This arrest stands." Scarjaw stared at him for a long moment. Snowflakes collected on his hair. His jaw tightened. Then he stepped back. One by one, the guards retreated to the SUV, helping their fallen companions up. Tristan sputtered objections, but Scarjaw silenced him with a look cold enough to freeze the lake behind them. "This isn't finished," Tristan hissed. Jack didn't reply. He didn't need to. The SUV pulled away slowly, tires crunching through the accumulating snow. The red coupe sat abandoned, half swallowed by the storm. Only when the taillights disappeared into the dark did Jack turn fully to Elias. "You didn't have to get involved," Jack said. Elias gave a faint, tired smile. "Didn't like what I saw?" "That makes two of us." Shadow sniffed at Elias's boot, then at his coat, as if evaluating the newcomer. After a moment, the shepherd sat beside Jack, still alert but calmer. Elias nodded toward Jack's cruiser. "You should get the dog checked. His breathing sounds off." Jack stiffened. "You noticed that?" "Mountain rescue doesn't make you blind," Elias said quietly. "And I've seen dogs push themselves when they shouldn't." The wind swept around them, carrying the cold scent of pine and the distant warning howl of a winter gale. Jack looked at Shadow, then at the stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, like a silent guardian. "Who are you?" he asked. Elias stepped back toward his truck, snow crunching underfoot. He didn't give a name yet. Only a truth. Someone who's not good at walking away when a fight's unfair. And then he turned, leaving Jack and Shadow in the blizzard's glow, two figures united against whatever Winter had planned next. The road to Winter's Reach. Veterinary emergency clinic cut through the storm like a narrow scar of faint yellow lights. Snow swirled across the windshield of Jack's cruiser, each gust tapping softly against the glass like a restless messenger. Jack drove with both hands locked on the wheel, knuckles pale beneath his gloves, shoulders rigid with the silent fear he refused to speak aloud. Shadow lay stretched across the back seat, his breathing uneven, each inhale sounding like a thin thread straining under weight. Though he tried to keep his posture proud, ears forward, eyes sharp, the shepherd's body betrayed fatigue. Even the rise and fall of his chest was slower than usual. Elias Crane sat beside him, one steady hand resting near Shadow's side, not touching, not crowding, simply there to keep the dog from shifting too much as the cruiser bumped over frozen ruts. In the dim glow from the passing street lamps, Elias's face looked carved from the mountains themselves, solid, calm, disciplined, but his eyes softened every time they fell on Shadow. "You're holding on," Elias murmured quietly. "Good. Just stay with us a little longer." Jack heard the softness in Elias's tone. It was not the voice of a stranger. It was the voice of someone who had carried injured teammates through storms where hope was a thin line on a distant ridge. For a moment, Jack allowed himself to breathe. Shadow is alive. That's what matters now. Snow hammered the cruiser roof. The storm had fully awakened, throwing white sheets of wind across the road as though trying to erase every tire mark behind them. The clinic appeared around the next bend, its sign half buried in frost. Winter's Reach. 24/7 animal care. Warm lights glowed through the windows, a tiny beacon against the winter's breath. Jack stopped the cruiser so abruptly that the brakes squeaked. He flung the door open. Elias opened the back door simultaneously, lifting Shadow with careful, practiced strength, supporting the dog's body so that every movement was gentle. Shadow pressed his muzzle weakly against Elias's forearm, as if acknowledging the help. Inside, the clinic staff reacted instantly. Dr. Miriam Hollow, a woman in her 50s with silver-threaded hair and sharp eyes softened by years of compassionate work, hurried forward. She smelled faintly of antiseptic and peppermint, the comforting scent of someone who had stayed up many nights trying to save animals that had nowhere else to go. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, but quick. "What happened?" Jack answered in a rush. He was knocked down, lost breath, maybe internal, but Miriam raised a hand. "We'll know soon. Let me work." Shadow was rushed into the treatment room. Elias placed him gently onto the padded table, then stepped back to give the team space. Jack stood at the doorway, unable to move, unable to speak, fingers trembling slightly despite the discipline he tried to maintain. Miriam examined Shadow with focused speed. She took vitals, ran her hands lightly along his ribs, watched his breathing pattern, monitored his gum color, and frowned in the thoughtful way of someone processing multiple possibilities at once. After several minutes, she looked up. "He's stable for now," she said, "but his breathing is shallow. I want to run imaging to check for bruising or fractures. He'll need to stay here for observation." "Is he in danger?" Jack asked, voice barely audible. "He's strong," Miriam said gently. "Stronger than most dogs. Whatever he's been through, he's still fighting." Jack exhaled shakily. Elias placed a hand on his shoulder, a steadying gesture without pity. "He'll make it," Elias said. "Trust him." When the clinic doors finally closed behind Shadow and the vet techs, the waiting room fell into a hush, broken only by the low hum of heating vents. Snow clung to Jack's uniform, melting slowly into dark patches. Elias sat beside him in silence, elbows resting on his knees. Jack dropped his head into his hands. For the first time since the confrontation on the lakeside road, he allowed the truth to spill out. "He took those hits because of me." Elias didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had seen countless comrades blame themselves for things beyond their control. "Dogs like him choose their battles," Elias said softly. "And they choose their partners. He didn't take anything because of you. He did it for you. Jack shook his head, eyes stinging. He shouldn't have had to. No, Elias agreed. But he did. And now your job is to make sure it wasn't for nothing. For a long moment, neither spoke. Snow brushed gently against the windows, whispering across the glass like a quiet, uninvited ghost. Finally, Miriam returned. Her expression was purposeful. He'll need surgery to minimize complications, she said. He has rib fractures and some bruising around the lungs. We'll treat it immediately. He's a fighter. His odds are good. Jack closed his eyes in relief. Elias let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Shadow was wheeled into the surgical suite. Jack stood outside the glass, watching the flurry of movement. Techs preparing instruments, antiseptic cloths being placed, monitors flickering to life. Shadow lay still but conscious, eyes flicking briefly toward Jack before the anesthesia mask was lowered. "He knows you're here," Miriam said. Jack nodded. "I won't leave." Elias stood slightly behind Jack, hands clasped loosely, posture quietly protective. Through the long hours of surgery, snow piled against the clinic walls, soft and relentless. A storm outside, a battle within. And in that waiting stillness, Jack found himself studying Elias. The man had a soldier's posture, straight but relaxed, ready without. Seeming tense, his jacket bore faint scars of its own, frayed stitching repaired multiple times by practical hands. A faint white line traced along one of his knuckles, an old injury. His eyes, steady, watchful, carried the calm of someone who had survived too much to fear storms anymore. "You knew exactly what to do back there," Jack said quietly. Elias shrugged. "Old habits? Military? Something like that," Elias replied. "Mostly mountains, cold places, places where decisions matter." "And tonight?" Jack asked. Elias looked toward the surgical room. Tonight, the right decision was obvious. Jack swallowed. "Thank you." Elias nodded once, as if accepting thanks was unfamiliar territory. Hours later, Miriam emerged again, tired but smiling. "He made it," she said. "Surgery was clean. He'll need weeks to recover, but he's strong, stronger than most." Jack exhaled a long breath of relief. Elias smiled faintly. "You can see him," Miriam added. Shadow lay resting under warm blankets, breathing steadier, chest rising gently. His coat had been cleaned of snow, and someone had placed a soft foam pad beneath his body. When Jack stepped close, Shadow's eyelids fluttered, and his tail brushed once against the blanket. Just a faint movement, but unmistakably his. Jack leaned down, voice breaking through the quiet. "You did good, partner. Rest now." Shadow blinked once, as if accepting the order. Elias stood silently at the doorway, arms folded. Jack turned to him. "I owe you." "No," Elias said simply. "You owe him." He nodded toward Shadow. He wasn't done fighting. Jack glanced back to his four-legged companion, then to the stranger who had stepped out of the storm at the exact moment the world tilted. "Stay," Jack said, "at least for a while." Elias didn't step into the room, but he didn't leave either. "Yeah," he murmured, "I can stay." And outside, winter's reach continued to storm, as though the wind carried secrets of battles fought and bonds forged in the heart of the cold. Winter's reach never slept easily during storms, and that night the wind prowled through the town like a restless spirit. Snow piled along rooftops and curled around street corners, muting colors and swallowing sound. At the police station, frost coated the windows in thin white feathers. Jack Rowan stepped inside with a tired heaviness that came not from the cold, but from the weight pressing against his heart. He expected a welcome, support. At the very least, a sense that the uniform he wore still meant something. Instead, he was greeted by silence. Officers glanced up at him with guarded expressions, then quickly returned to their screens. A few whispered in corners. Jack felt the shift immediately, like stepping into a room where someone had just slammed a door but tried to pretend nothing happened. Beside him, Elias Crane stood like a mountain carved from ice, silent, unreadable, scanning the room with soldier's intuition. He didn't belong here, yet his presence steadied Jack more than anyone in uniform. Captain Hartley emerged from his office, arms crossed. Hartley was a man in his late 50s, thick-set, with silver hair clipped short and a voice usually calm as Riverstone. But tonight, he avoided Jack's eyes. "Rowan," Hartley said stiffly, "we need to talk." Jack braced himself. Before that, Shadow made it through surgery. He's stable. Hartley's eyes flickered with a brief warmth. "Good. I'm glad." But the warmth faded as quickly as it came. He motioned Jack into his office. Elias followed, leaning quietly against the wall like a watchful shadow. Inside, Hartley exhaled, rubbing a hand across his forehead. "Jack, the Vales sent their attorney. They're accusing you of mishandling the arrest, claiming Shadow attacked first." Jack stared, stunned. "That's impossible. They're men." Hartley raised a hand. "I believe you, but the Vale family is connected. Their influence goes deep, and they've already filed a formal complaint." Jack felt a coldness sharper than the wind outside. "You think they can bury what happened?" Hartley's silence was answer enough. "And you?" Jack asked quietly. "Where do you stand?" Hartley's jaw tightened. "I'm telling you as a friend, let this go. Don't push back. Don't make waves. You're suspended pending review." The words hit Jack like a blow. Suspended, for doing his job, for protecting this town, for nearly losing Shadow. Elias shifted at the wall, eyes narrowing. His voice was low, steady. "This is exactly what they want." Hartley shot Elias a warning look. "This is department business." "And injustice is everyone's business," Elias replied. Jack stood. "I'm not rewriting the report. Shadow didn't attack first. Your own officers saw how those men moved." Hartley's face softened just slightly, regret flickering in his eyes. "Jack, sometimes doing the right thing comes at a cost." Elias clasped a hand on Jack's shoulder as they stepped outside the office. "They're afraid of the Vales. That's what this is." Jack swallowed the bitterness rising in him. "Then the Vales win." "Not if we're smarter," Elias said. As if summoned by the tension in the air, Jack's phone buzzed with an incoming message. Tristan Vale. The text was short. "Meet at the Winterfall warehouse. Tonight, no uniforms, no paperwork. I can fix your career, if you cooperate." Jack read it twice, jaw clenching. "It's a trap," Elias said immediately. "He wants leverage, probably thinks he can force you into changing the report." Jack nodded grimly. "And if I don't go? They'll spin a story whether you're there or not." Jack looked at the clinic report in his hand. Shadow's injuries, the hours of surgery, the fight that nearly cost his partner everything. "This isn't about me anymore," Jack murmured. "It's about making sure no one like Tristan thinks he's above the law." Elias's voice softened. "Then we go. But we go smart." They headed to Jack's house first, a modest cabin near the northern tree line, where snow formed thick drifts around the porch. Inside, Jack retrieved a thin micro-recorder, its wire no thicker than a thread. Elias helped tape it beneath Jack's thermal shirt, adjusting it so the device lay hidden and secure. Next came the planning. Jack paced. "We need proof, his words, his threats." "You'll get them," Elias replied. "I'll be inside, above you, unseen." Jack frowned. "Above me?" Elias gave a small, almost amused nod. "Warehouses always have scaffolding and beams. Height gives advantage, and I'm familiar with moving quietly." Jack studied him. "What were you, Elias?" Elias didn't answer fully. Someone who learned how to move through the dark without making noise. "And the investigator?" Elias pulled out his own phone. The screen cracked at the corner, contact names simple and unadorned. "There's someone from the state, someone I saved on a mountain years ago. She owes me." Jack raised a brow as Elias typed. "That kind of favor usually comes with strings." Elias's faint smile appeared, just for a moment. "I only pull the string when the cause is worth it." They prepared fast. Elias scouted the warehouse before nightfall, quietly, without stepping inside. He observed the power lines, the rusted exterior, the way snow drifted unevenly near the entrance where wind slipped through broken panels. Then he returned to Jack with the report. "One power line feeds the whole building. Old wiring, no backup generator. If things turn bad, we cut the lights. They'll panic. You won't." Jack nodded. "And the exit?" "There's a loading ramp on the east side. If you can get Tristan into the open, the state investigator can intercept." Jack drew a breath. This could go wrong in 100 ways. Elias replied, or it could go right in one. When night descended, it did so with a vengeance. The storm thickened, sweeping snow across the warehouse yard in great white waves. The building loomed against the dark like a forgotten glacier, its metal sides groaning under the weight of years and winter. Jack approached alone, footprints crisp in the fresh powder. His breath hung like smoke. Inside, dim lights glowed through the cracks in the wooden slats. Elias was already in place, quiet as a shadow, hidden high among the rafters, watching. Jack pushed open the door. Tristan stood near the center of the warehouse, surrounded by men. More than before. Some leaned against crates, others held flashlights angled downward. None wore uniforms, but all carried the confidence of paid enforcers. Tristan looked sober now, sober, angry, and reckless. "You came," he said. "Smart." Jack's voice was flat. "What do you want?" Tristan paced with the swagger of someone who believed the world should bow when he moved. "Your report. I want you to change it. Make it say Shadow attacked, that you misread the situation." Jack remained still. "I won't." A guard stepped forward, but Tristan waved him back. "I'm offering you your badge," Tristan said. "Your career, your dog's future." Jack's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Above them, Elias shifted silently, observing every angle, every flashlight beam, every guard placement. And outside, the investigator was on her way, tracking the signal from the small device Elias had hidden in Jack's car. Tristan leaned in. "You don't want my family as an enemy." Jack's reply was quiet but unwavering. "I already have them as one." Tristan's face twisted at the refusal. He signaled subtly, and several guards repositioned toward Jack. But that was the moment the world shifted. A sudden crack snapped through the warehouse. A single, precise impact. Sparks burst from the power junction on the wall as Elias's shot severed the line feeding the old system. The warehouse plunged into darkness. Shouts erupted. Flashlights spun wildly. Footsteps clattered against the wooden floor. A swirl of confusion filled the air. And Elias descended into the chaos like winter's own blade, not striking, not harming, but disarming, redirecting, and dismantling the guards' movements with quiet, efficient precision. Jack used the moment to grab Tristan's wrist, twisting him into a controlled hold and driving him toward the nearest metal support pillar. The cuffs clicked shut around Tristan's hands with a sound final as thunder. Outside, the howl of sirens cut through the wind as the state investigator arrived. Inside, Tristan struggled. "You can't do this!" Jack held him firmly. "I already have." Elias appeared beside him, breath steady, eyes sharp. "You ready?" he asked. "Yeah," Jack said. "Let's end this." And together, they walked Tristan out into the storm, toward the lights of justice finally coming for the Vale Empire. Morning arrived slowly in winter's reach, as if the sun itself hesitated to pry open the frozen night. A soft band of pale gold stretched across the horizon, touching the tops of pine trees and glinting against rooftops buried under heavy layers of snow. The storm had weakened at last, leaving behind a landscape carved from frost and silence, clean, breathtaking, and fragile. Jack Rowan stepped out of the state investigator's SUV into the crisp morning air. He had not slept. None of them had. The warehouse operation had stretched through the night, searching, documenting, detaining. As dawn settled over the town, the consequences of the Vale Empire finally began to surface like long buried stones rising through thawing earth. Agents in Navy winter jackets moved across the snow-covered lot, gathering statements, collecting evidence, and securing the area. The arrested men, including Tristan Vale, waited in lined vehicles, guarded by calm, precise officers from the State Bureau. Cameras from the warehouse had captured just enough. The recording on Jack's micro device had captured even more. No amount of money could dissolve what had been spoken in the darkness. Jack exhaled into the cold, breath turning into a thin cloud. There was no triumph in the feeling, only a quiet, weary clarity. Justice, when slow, hit colder than winter. Beside him stood Elias Crane, still and quiet, watching the agents with the wary calm of someone familiar with aftermaths. Snow dusted his jacket, catching on the wool collar, giving him the look of a man carved from frost and stubborn will. "You held your ground," Elias murmured. Jack shook his head. We did. Elias gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He confessed on tape. That will travel fast. And his father? Jack asked. They'll reach him soon enough. Influence doesn't hold up long in daylight. Jack turned toward the horizon. The pale sun was rising above the frosted lake, a fragile reminder that even after storms, light returned. But his heart was not focused on the case. It drifted to the veterinary clinic on the other side of town, where a warm room and a recovering German shepherd waited. The drive to the clinic was a quiet pilgrimage. Roads were still lined with fresh snow, plows pushing slow mountains of white aside. Jack rolled down the window just enough for the morning air to brush his face. He needed the cold to stay awake, needed it to soften the storm still stirring inside him. When they reached the clinic, the parking lot was half buried in snowbanks. The sign over the entrance glowed with gentle amber light. Inside, warmth wrapped around them like a blanket. The faint smell of disinfectant and herbal shampoo clung to the air. Dr. Miriam Hollow emerged from the back, her silver hair pulled into a loose braid. Tired lines marked her face, but her eyes were warm. "You're back early?" she said. Jack's voice was tight with concern. "How is he?" Miriam smiled, small, reassuring, the kind that warms rather than blinds. "See for yourself." Jack followed her down the corridor, Elias behind him with quiet steps. Shadow lay in a recovery pen padded with soft blankets, an IV gently secured to his foreleg. His chest rose and fell with steady rhythm. His ears perked when Jack entered, and his tail brushed lightly across the bedding, weak but eager. Jack knelt beside him, resting his hand on the shepherd's warm shoulder. "Morning, partner." Shadow blinked slowly, leaning into Jack's touch. "He's healing well," Miriam said. "Ribs will take time, no sudden movements, no intense training, and absolutely no jumping. But he's strong enough to start short walks in a few days." Jack nodded, relief warming him from the inside out. "Thank you." Elias crouched nearby, watching Shadow with a soft expression rarely shown on his face. "Told you he wasn't finished." Shadow's eyes shifted to Elias, as if recognizing the man who had stepped out of the storm on his behalf. The shepherd let out a small, low woof, barely a sound, but full of meaning. Elias chuckled. "Yeah, I see you." Miriam cleared her throat. "He'll need someone patient during recovery." Jack smiled faintly. "That's me." "And someone who listens," Miriam added, arching a brow. "No chasing after suspects for a while." "That's him," Elias said, pointing at Jack. Jack rolled his eyes. "Traitor." Later that afternoon, Winter's Reach brightened with rare sunlight. Snow shimmered like millions of diamonds scattered across the town. The storm had broken, leaving behind a world newly carved and ready for beginnings. Jack and Elias walked along the snow-packed path in the small park near the center of town. Shadow trotted beside them at a gentle pace, supported by a recovery harness Jack held carefully. The shepherd's steps were slow but purposeful, his ears alert, his tail swaying softly. "What now?" Jack asked. Elias considered the question as he sipped from a steaming cup of coffee he'd bought from a nearby truck. "The Bureau will take over the Vale investigation. Your name gets cleared officially soon. Might even get commendation." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Commendation for nearly getting fired?" "For not bending," Elias replied. "Most people bend. You didn't." Jack smiled faintly. "What about you? Going back up the mountain or disappearing into another storm?" Elias looked out across the park. Children laughed near the sledding hill. Couples strolled. A vendor sold hot cocoa from a cart dusted with snow. The world felt strangely gentle, different from the harsh edges he'd known for so many years. "I haven't decided," Elias said quietly. Jack gave a slow nod. "There's room here, if you want to stay." Elias inhaled, letting the cold air fill his lungs. "Winter's Reach is quieter than the places I've been, but I go where I'm needed." Shadow nudged his leg gently, as if voicing his own opinion. Elias scratched behind the dog's ear. "You're persuasive." Jack smiled at the interaction. Man, dog, winter morning, settling around them like a painting. "You don't need a badge to help people," Jack said, "but we do need people like you." Elias looked toward the horizon, where sunlight spilled across frozen treetops. If winter tries swallowing this place again, I'll be here." Jack nodded, and for the first time in days, peace found him. Shadow barked once, a small, bright sound. The dog took a few more steps, steady and strong, and Jack followed. Elias walked beside them, a silent guardian shaped by storms. In the stillness, the world felt whole again. Because sometimes winter brought miracles, not with thunder, not with blazing fire, but with quiet choices made by people who refused to walk away, and by loyal dogs whose courage echoed long after the snow stopped falling. Sometimes God's miracles do not arrive with thunder or shining signs. Sometimes they come quietly through a loyal dog who refuses to give up, through a stranger who steps forward at the right moment, or through the strength God places in our hearts when we think we have none left. This story reminds us that even in the deepest winter, God never leaves us alone. He guides our steps, protects our families, and sends help in ways we often do not expect. In our everyday lives, we face storms of our own, moments of fear or worry, or days when hope feels small. But faith teaches us that God still works in the details. He still opens paths. He still rescues us in His time. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Leave a comment to tell us your thoughts, and remember to subscribe for more stories of hope and courage. May God bless you and your family with peace, strength, and protection. And if you feel grateful for the quiet miracles God has given you, type Amen in the comments.